The year was 1876, and the Ozark backwoods of Missouri were quiet after sundown. The roads, dusty and crooked, were traveled only by traders and ghosts, and at the end of one such road stood a lonely wooden tavern, the Willow's Rest. Locals said it was a place where the weary could trade whiskey for peace, and where, on rare nights, the old piano by the corner would play, even when no hands touched it. Most thought it was superstition, but those who'd been there swore otherwise. One cold November night, a stranger named Elias Crowe rode in, a tall man with weary eyes and a revolver that looked older than he was. His horse was half-starved, his boots caked with the red dust of the western trails. When he pushed open the tavern door, every head turned. The smell of tobacco and wet wood filled the air. Behind the counter, a woman with iron-gray hair and sharp eyes poured whiskey like it was medicine. "Name's Martha Dunn," she said. "You look like a man carrying ghosts, mister." Elias gave a small nod. "Just looking for a place to rest. And maybe—" His eyes flicked toward the piano. "A bit of music." Martha froze for just a second before replying quietly, "That piano don't play for everyone, Mr. Crowe." Martha Dunn had owned the Willow's Rest since the war ended. She'd lost a husband and two brothers to the fighting, and a son to fever soon after. The tavern was all she had left, a shelter for wanderers, a place to forget sorrow. She knew everyone who passed through. Most came for the whiskey, some came to forget. But every once in a while someone came for the piano, a relic from St. Louis, old and chipped, but still able to whisper tunes that could make grown men weep. When Elias Crowe asked about it, Martha's hands trembled just slightly. "That piano's been quiet for months," she said. "It only plays when it has a reason." Elias tilted his head. "What kind of reason?" Martha gave him a long, unreadable look. "The kind that comes with a story too heavy to carry." That night the tavern's regulars, farmers, trappers, and one quiet preacher watched Elias nurse his drink in silence. He didn't talk much, just stared at the piano as though it knew his secrets. Later, when the lamps dimmed, he asked Martha softly, "Mind if I play?" She hesitated. "You play well?" "I used to," he said, "back before everything turned to dust." The keys were yellowed, one or two broken, but as Elias's fingers touched them, a soft, trembling melody filled the tavern. The song was low and haunting, part hymn, part lament. And for a moment, everyone went silent. Even the storm outside paused to listen. When he finished, Martha's voice broke the stillness. "That song, what is it?" Elias looked down. "It's called Last Request. My wife wrote it." Martha wiped a tear from her eye. "Your wife? She passed?" Elias nodded. From his coat pocket he pulled out a worn photograph. A young woman with light eyes and a soft smile, holding a small child on her lap. "They were taken by fever 3 winters ago," he said. "I buried them near the old creek outside Independence." He stared at the image a long time before sliding it across the bar. "I used to play her song every night after she died. Thought if I played it enough, maybe she'd hear it, wherever she was." Martha's heart ached. "This place has known that kind of pain," she said quietly. "But it's not the song that calls them back, Mr. Crowe. It's what's left unsaid." Long after closing time, Martha sat with Elias by the dim glow of the lantern. "You said the piano only plays for those with a reason," Elias said. "What did you mean?" She hesitated, glancing toward the instrument as though afraid to wake it. "Some nights," she whispered, "I'll be alone, cleaning up, and I'll hear it play. A slow tune, one my husband used to hum. And when it stops, I smell tobacco, the kind he smoked." Elias frowned. "You think he's still here?" Martha gave a faint smile. "No. But I think the piano remembers. Elias chuckled softly. Memories in wood and strings. I like that. But his eyes said something else. Hope. The next evening, a new visitor arrived. A lawman by the name of Deputy Cal Boone. Young, sharp-eyed, with a silver star and a cautious smile. He greeted Martha with familiarity. "Evenin', Miss Dunn. Heard there's a stranger stayin' here. Big fella, black coat, quiet as a grave?" Martha's eyes flicked toward Elias, who sat by the piano. "Depends who's askin'," she said. Boone rested a hand on his revolver. "Got a warrant for a man named Elias Crowe. Former Confederate officer, wanted for robbery and murder down by Clay County." The tavern fell silent. The rain outside seemed to pause. Elias stood slowly. "That what they're sayin' now?" Boone's hand tightened. "That's what the papers say." Elias looked at Martha, his eyes tired but steady. "If I told you I didn't do it, would you believe me?" Martha didn't answer. Deputy Boone motioned toward the door. "Come on, Crowe. Let's not make a scene." Elias sighed, removing his hat. "I won't run. But you ought to know. I didn't kill anyone." Not that day. Boone kept his revolver steady. "Save it for the judge." As they reached the door, the piano, silent since the night before, gave a single note. Boone froze. "What in—" Then another key pressed. Then another. A slow, deliberate tune, the same one Elias had played. "Last request." Everyone watched, wide-eyed. Elias hadn't touched the keys. Martha whispered, "It's playing by itself." The deputy stepped back, pale. "What kind of trick is this?" Elias just stood there, tears filling his eyes. "That's her song," he said softly. "She's telling me something." Boone's jaw tightened. "You trying to scare me with ghost stories?" Elias turned to him, voice breaking. "You want the truth? Fine. I was there when the bank was robbed, but I wasn't the one who fired the shot. The man who did. He's the one who walked away with the money." Boone's expression flickered. "Name?" Elias hesitated. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." The piano hit a sharp, mournful chord. "Try me," Boone said. Elias swallowed hard. "Your brother, Samuel Boone. He was the shooter." The room went still. Martha gasped. Boone's face drained of color. "You lie." Elias shook his head. "I tried to stop him." He panicked, pulled the trigger before I could say a word. He said no one would believe a Confederate over a Boone. So I ran. Been running ever since the piano fell silent. Martha stepped between the men. "Enough. Both of you. This tavern has seen too much death already." Boone's hand trembled on his gun, his face twisted with conflict. "You expect me to believe my own blood killed a man in cold blood?" Elias met his gaze evenly. "You already know it's true. Otherwise, you wouldn't be shaken like that." Boone's eyes fell to the piano. The silence was deafening. Then, just as suddenly, the piano began again. This time, it wasn't Last Request. It was a new melody, gentle, sorrowful, but full of forgiveness. Martha whispered, "That's not a tune anyone here knows." Elias closed his eyes. "It's her way of saying, it's time to stop running." Boone's revolver lowered. He looked at Elias long and hard, then said quietly, Maybe we both been haunting ourselves with the wrong ghosts." Later that night, after Boone had left to verify Elias's story, Martha found Elias sitting alone by the piano. He was holding a folded piece of paper. "She left this," he said softly. "Found it in her Bible before I buried her." Never opened it till tonight. Martha sat beside him. "What does it say?" Elias smiled through his tears. "It's short." Just one line. He handed it to her. In neat, fading ink, it read, "When the music plays without hands, you'll know I've forgiven you." Martha's breath caught. "So, the piano," Elias nodded. She kept her promise. He placed the letter gently on the piano and whispered, "Thank you, Sarah." The piano gave one soft note, a final chord that hung in the air like a sigh. And then, for the first time in years, Elias Crowe smiled. By dawn, the Missouri backwoods were washed clean by the night's rain. Mist hung low over the hills, and the road that led to the Willow's Rest looked almost peaceful. Inside, the tavern was silent, save for the soft ticking of a clock and the faint scent of last night's fire. Elias Crowe hadn't slept. He sat by the piano, hat in his lap, eyes red but calm. Martha poured 2 mugs of coffee and joined him. "You played her song one last time," she said. He nodded slowly. "I reckon that was the point of all this. Not to prove anything to the law, just to let her go." Martha smiled faintly. "She let you go first, Elias. That's why it played." He looked up at her with something like peace for the first time. "Maybe. But I still owe the livin' the truth." Before noon, Deputy Cal Boone returned. But he wasn't alone. Riding behind him was an older man with a heavy beard and a limp. The sight of him made Martha gasp. Samuel Boone. The older man looked pale and worn, his eyes hollow. "It's true," he said quietly, before anyone could speak. "What Elias told you. It's all true." Elias rose, stunned. You came?" Samuel nodded. "Couldn't keep running. I saw that piano once, years ago. Heard it play when your wife died. I didn't understand it then. But when Cal came asking questions, I knew my time had come." Boone turned to his brother, disbelief in his eyes. "Why, Sam? Why didn't you tell me?" Samuel's voice trembled. "Because I couldn't face what I'd done. That man I shot, he wasn't even armed. I let them hang the blame on Elias. I've carried that sin like lead in my chest." The tavern went silent. Even the wind outside seemed to hold its breath. Martha set down her glass, her hands shaking. "So all these years, this man's been hunted for nothing?" Samuel nodded slowly. "I'm ready to sign a statement. Tell the sheriff everything." Boone's face softened, torn between duty and pain. "You'll hang for it." Samuel gave a tired smile. "I've been hanging inside for near 10 years already." Elias's eyes filled with emotion. "You're braver now than I ever was." Samuel looked down. "No, Elias. You kept your honor. You kept playing that song." At that, the piano gave a faint creak, though no one had touched it. The sound made everyone fall silent, like the building itself was listening. Martha lit a lantern as dusk fell, though none of them felt like eating. Elias sat at the piano once more. "One more song," he murmured. He played not Last Request this time, but something new, a tune that began in sorrow and rose to something almost holy, a melody of mercy and truth. Samuel closed his eyes as the notes filled the tavern. Tears streamed down his face. "She's here," he whispered. "Your wife. I can feel her." The piano shimmered with sound, soft, trembling, alive. Martha felt it too, that strange warmth that filled the air when something beyond the living brushed past. When the last note faded, a gust of wind swept through the open window, gentle, like a sigh. And for a heartbeat, everyone swore they heard a woman's laughter, faint and free. The next morning, the sheriff rode in. A stout, gruff man named Harvey Pike, known for being more practical than kind. Boone handed him the signed confession from his brother. The sheriff read it twice, frowning deeply. "Well, I'll be damned," he said finally. "Crowe, looks like you were right. You're a free man." Elias nodded, saying nothing. Pike turned to Samuel. "You know what this means, Boone." Samuel met his eyes calmly. "I'm ready." Boone stepped forward. "Sheriff," he turned himself in. "He's sick, old. Let him live out what's left of his days in peace." Pike sighed. "Law don't bend easy, son." but the way he said it lacked conviction, as though even he knew mercy had already taken root in that tavern. Later that day, Martha found something unexpected, tucked behind the tavern's old mirror in an envelope marked with dust and age. She opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten letter, dated 1864, signed by Thomas Dunn, her late husband. It read, "Martha, if this tavern stands after I'm gone, promise me you'll let it be a home for the broken. Let the music play for those who have nowhere else to go. The world's got enough judgment. It needs mercy." Tears welled in her eyes. She read it aloud to Elias and the Boone brothers. Elias smiled softly. "Seems the piano's been following that promise all along." Martha nodded. "Maybe that's what the last requests really mean. The songs of souls looking for peace." That night, Elias sat by the piano again. Samuel Boone sat nearby, weak but lighter, as if a lifetime's burden had been lifted. "I ain't long for this world," Samuel murmured, "but I'd like to hear her song once more before I go." Elias nodded. His fingers touched the keys gently, and the tavern filled with that haunting melody, "Last Request." Halfway through, though, the piano began to move on its own, the melody changing, softening, lifting. Elias's hands fell still, but the tune continued, pure, glowing, like moonlight in sound. Samuel smiled faintly. "She forgave me, too." Moments later, he leaned back in his chair, eyes closing peacefully. The piano played one final note and fell silent. They buried Samuel Boone behind the tavern, near the willow tree that gave the Willow's Rest its name. No preacher, no crowd, just Martha, Elias, and Cal Boone. Afterward, Elias stayed behind, staring at the piano. "Do you think it'll play again?" Martha smiled faintly. "Only when someone needs to be forgiven." He traced the edge of the keys. "Then maybe it's time someone new takes care of it." She looked up. "You mean—" Elias nodded. "I'll stay a while. Fix the place up. Maybe teach the piano a few new songs." Weeks passed. Winter came to the backwoods. Travelers began to find their way to the Willow's Rest again, loggers, soldiers, widows. And when they did, they found a quiet man with kind eyes playing gentle music on an old piano. Elias Crowe never spoke much about the past, but sometimes when someone cried at his tunes, he'd smile and say, "That piano knows what your heart's asking. Just listen. It'll play your request." Martha would watch from behind the bar, feeling that same warmth she'd known the night the piano first moved. The tavern became known throughout the region, not for its whiskey but for its miraculous piano that played what the soul needed to hear. Years later, when Elias passed away, quietly in his sleep, Martha found him still seated at the piano, hands resting gently on the keys. No one heard music that night, not a sound. But when the morning light broke through the windows, a single note rang out clear and pure, echoing through the hills. It was the note of peace. Martha placed a small brass plaque on the piano that read, "The Willow's Rest, where the piano plays last requests." And locals say that even now, on stormy Missouri nights, when the wind hums through the trees and the lanterns flicker low, a soft melody drifts from the old tavern, a song of mercy, of forgiveness, of endings that become beginnings. Because some music never truly ends, it just waits for the next soul in need.